Welcome back to Teaching Orchestra. School districts are looking for fine arts teachers that can serve in cross-curricular functions. In the literature curriculum at your school, do your students read Homer's Odyssey? If they do, wouldn't it be cool to tie it in with Katie O'Hara-Labree's Voyage of Odysseus in their curriculum? Maybe you could create some slides for each of the movements here, with gods or goddesses or whatever, and put on a little performance for the English department students that ties it in with their literature. That might be cool. Or maybe they're reading the Percy Jackson books and they're running across these figures in Greek mythology, and this could be a good promotional tool for your orchestra program. And you could tie it in with some co-curricular teaching to your English department, and it might be good for them and good for your orchestra. And I think your students might get a kick out of being featured at your school. Your students are probably familiar with Cyclops from Book 9 of Homer's Odyssey and or the Percy Jackson books, with the character Tyson. They were a race of uncivilized shepherds on the island of Hyperia, Sicily, who were far better known for their aggressive nature than for their intelligence. They were living in caves where they stored copious amounts of cheese. And how do we tap into your students' imagination and tell that story musically? Katie O'Hara-Labree instructs us to really encourage your students to get into the pesante style with heavy weight. And you'll see that the pesante is marked in the parts and score, along with accents in the melodic parts, and some suggested bowings, down, up for on the beat, and up bows for off the beat. So with our teaching concepts, let's start with pesante. Heavy, right? Think of the Cyclops. They were much larger than Odysseus and his crew. So when we think about a Cyclops playing the cello, all right, lots of power, lots of weight, really press into the string. The violins represent the footsteps. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. For this passage, make sure that your students set the bow in the rests. In the teaching companion, available on teachingorchestra.com, I have the students practice setting the bow in the rest. For a more advanced teaching concept, have them set the bow and wiggle the string with the bow hair. That way they get a nice, strong articulation to represent the footstep of the Cyclops. You can see here in rhythm 1 and rhythm 2, I make sure that they set the bow in the rest and give it a little wiggle. For some of this stuff, it's very important that they set the bows in the rests. I have them practice this homogeneously because everybody in the orchestra is going to get the walking rhythm at some point, and everybody's going to get a melodic rhythm too. It's kind of split that way. If we look in measure 27, that's where the voices exchange. The violins take over the melodic figure. They're kind of in thirds here. Then later on, we have these walking footsteps here. And the cellos play on the beats and the ends of the beats just to kind of reinforce that. While I'm here, you see this little introductory theme comes back here before we transition to the next section. I think that's cool. Your first violins are probably going to recognize that, but I think it would be really cool if you ask like the cellists or the bass players like, hey, did anybody hear that? Do you know where it comes from? Just to see if they're listening across the ensemble, it could be a cool teaching tool. So we talked about the footsteps and how to set the bow and the rest, but what about the pesante? We've got some teaching challenges here too. We start with the rest. We do need to set the bow just like we did before. However, we've got this half note, quarter note, then dotted half note, quarter note. We're going to need to get back to the frog for this stuff up here to make it heavy and accented. This is pesante too, and there are accents on every single note. Remember, the Cyclops, they were pretty uncultured. They didn't work with metal, they didn't know about the gods and goddesses, so there isn't a lot of nuance here. Everything is heavy, everything is accented. The difficulty with the technique is going to be with bow distribution. It's trickier in the A theme because of that rest and then the dotted half note and then the dotted half note, then quarter note, because if you get too far in the upper half of the bow, it makes it more difficult to play with that pesante style. So we got to get back to the frog, and we got to do so in a way that doesn't break our phrase. To do this, I like to have my students practice on open strings all together just to make it easier. I isolate each rhythm, and in the teaching companion, we do it on an open D just like we did with the footstep rhythm. Here in rhythm 3, we've got the rest, we've got the half note, quarter note, all on open D. Everybody learns it at the same time. They can repeat it over and over again and make sure that they're able to get back to the lower half of the bow. If they're able to use good bow distribution, I think they're going to be very successful with this section of the piece. And the left hand really isn't as much of a challenge here, except maybe for measure 40 in the first violins. They've got this part right here where they go up to the E string. It's in half position. There could be intonation issues and also tone issues. And I like to isolate this in the teaching companion, addressing the left hand. And I give it to everybody so everybody can play along and learn the technique. But primarily for the violins, they have the challenge of playing on the E string and creating good tone. Previously, we've worked on using lots of weight, lots of heavy bows. Here we're on the E string, and we don't need to use as much weight, so we have to get them used to playing on the E string and angling their bows. The coaching cue that I like to use is tip. And when I call tip, my students try to point the tip of their bows towards the ceiling to get a better bowing angle for better sound. Also, we need to make sure their setups are correct. If they're playing too flat, they can't really point the bow up to the tip because they drag their bow hair across the C bout. So make sure they're set up well with their violins out here instead of in front of them flat, or else they're not going to make a good sound. I like to isolate this measure and have their stand partners coach them by splitting the orchestra in half. I have the outside players play and the inside players coach. And we do it a few times, and we have the inside players give feedback, right? Hey, are they able to point their bows tips to the ceiling, give them some feedback, and then we do it a few times and then flip it and then have the outside players coach the inside players. They can use the coaching cues too. If their bowing angles are not getting right, they could say tip and try to straighten their bows out. Look, I have this written in the teaching companions, but you don't need to buy this stuff. You can just write the notes on the board and just have them play it like that. It's fine. We've got this available for sale if it's easier for you just to print it out and have all the stuff. That's great, but you could just write it on the board. That's fine too. I'm going to go through this work a section at a time just to kind of organize the content. So I'll stop here for this video. And in the next video, I'm going to pick it back up with Circe's Island. I hope to see you then.